Alright. Oh, don't need this thing right here. I don't know. What is here? I should be seeing this side. There we go. Let me get rid of this. Alright, sorry about that. Just got some work to do here, but I thought I'd chat with you guys a little bit. It is officially, at least for me, the end of the Get It Painted challenge. Woo! Made it! Yay! I always gotta look at these drop pod instructions. I swear, it doesn't matter how many drop pods I put together, they're always like horrible. So yeah, let me work here. So I got managed to, I think, I'm not sure exactly. I know I showed you guys a bunch of the stuff that I did, but I think, let me turn here. This is the last thing I got fully painted right there. It's the escape hatch to you can put up for various buildings. I painted that for a reason. I'm not going to reveal that online. It's a secret. It's a local secret, and someone might figure out why I painted that. But coming up the next tournament here that's coming out. So, but yeah, I got that painted, and that was the last thing I did paint. I'd like to put a shout out there. Thanks to Edict Beer for his painting challenge. I got quite a few buildings done. In fact, let me just do a quick real count here. 1, 5, 6, 7. I got 17 terrain features painted up from the challenge. All done already. Finish coat on them and everything, which is a great start. I've probably got as many or more, if you count like individual bunker and crater pieces and things like that. But got a good start on it. I've got to really break into some other stuff. I spent the other day making these guys here, the 2 Electro Priests, and I made the Rust Stalkers. I turned that one box that I had of extras into Rust Stalkers because I like those guys. I actually like the Infiltrators better at first until and this is totally by accident, but in a game I was able to use my Rust Stalkers running up and knocking out a bunch of Eldar light vehicles. Really nasty little Forge World things. They have some punch, but they're kind of glass hammers, and as far as their armor and stuff like that. Try to rely on their speed, but they couldn't quite get out of the way of the Rust Stalkers. And they would just run up to one and just boom, pop it. Just kept popping them, and didn't have the chance to explode it, so that was good. They just come in, pop the vehicle. No more rain of, I think it was like AP2 or something, strength 8 AP2 shots. I think it has 3 or something. I can't remember what it was called. Some Forge World skimmer thing. But yeah, it was just one little unit of Rust Stalkers that was doing that. Just 5 guys. And he was shooting at them, but they were just holding their own. They did really good, so it was something that I hadn't really realized or thought about using the Rust Stalkers for. Was that. So that was an interesting thing. A bonus, kind of, to be able to do that. So that's why I went with them. Of course, eventually I would like to have 2 full units of both, and then another unit of these and another unit of those on the priests, so that I can do the formations. Not really, maybe those formations will be super useful, but you never know. You never know. And cut this in half so it all stacks in the box a little bit more conveniently for me over here. Probably just knock this out real quick. But yeah, I gotta get these drop pods finished, and then I realized the other day I also need more rhinos. I want to. There's a couple armies I'm gonna work on right now. The AdMech could use a little bit of tweaks here and there, but it's a pretty good army, pretty powerful. Got to use note cards to play it because the rules are all over. But who knows? The next edition may fix that coming up here. But for now, good army, works out. Might need a few tweaks here and there, but nothing drastically needed. But my Death Watch, and they need some help. And so, planning on doing some stuff, getting some units together, building, painting stuff that I have in the back log, and getting those to where they are viable units. I think a lot of people discount the Deathwatch, and of course I'm not going to say, hey, the Deathwatch, yeah, that can be a top tier army. They're not going to be Eldar or Necrons or Space Marines, formation. You get free transports all over the place or anything like that, Skyhammer or anything like that. That is not going to be the case, but I think with some tweaks and some care of putting lists together and just being, a little bit more careful about your points and efficiency, that Deathwatch can end up being a very interesting army to play and a very challenging opponent, maybe. It just depends on what you do. You've just got to play to their strengths, I think, and I think the strengths that they've built into the Deathwatch are currently foreign to the meta in a lot of ways. And not just local meta, I think my local meta, because each local meta is different, but I think overall meta in the 40k playfield out there right now that we're all in. And I think they really could end up being a usable army. Of course, I'm the kind of person that takes all kinds of stuff. I've taken Inquisition to tournaments. Pure Inquisition. No, not as allies, as Inquisition. And I've actually done semi-decent. Got smacked around. But it was always like, it wasn't like blown out smacked around. It was like, if some things had gone a little bit differently my way, I would have had a decent chance. Kind of thing. So it's like, almost did it kind of way. It wasn't I can say like War Convocation and some Eldar lists and stuff almost are like auto wins for a lot of people. And nothing's an auto win, but an easy one. Let's say that it doesn't take a whole lot to figure out a win. There's not a whole lot that's going to be like coming up and causing you to have to rethink your tactics and adapt and overcome. But Deathwatch could be one of those armies where you could get those wins just as long as you could adapt and overcome and stuff. Clip faster. See, there's Robert right there. He wants me to clip. I don't even know if he's still watching. Clip faster. See, I was looking down here, not looking over at the chat. Didn't know Robert was up there trying to mess with me. He's trying to find my secrets because we're playing tomorrow, and he wants to know all my secrets because I do secrets, and then people find my secrets out on the table, and then they steal them from me because my secrets are so secretive and stuff, right? No, not really. But yeah, I think the Deathwatch could really end up being something. It's just got to be played properly. It's like Dark Eldar. Dark Eldar can be tough. A lot of people refer to them as glass cannons, and in a way they are. They hit hard, but they shatter pretty easily if they're played wrong. They're a hard army to learn how to play. I would say Admech in a way is a hard army to learn how to play, because I think even if you, like me, get the note cards and are trying to pay attention to everything, it's almost impossible not to miss a rule at some point during the game, and that could be a critical mistake for sure. And the part of it is that every single Skitarii and Cult Mechanicus unit pretty much has its own little cornucopia of special rules that they deal with, right? It's crazy stuff. But anyway, I just mostly wanted to come on chat and talk about the painting challenge and all that stuff, and what I'm going to be doing here in the short future. And I had to work on this, so I figured let's just live stream it for now. Not to be particularly an interesting live stream. People put drop pods together all the time. Of course, the way I put stuff together, there may be some hilarity here. And I'm not going to finish this with you. I don't think it takes a while. Now these guys, I can put these guys together in, what was it? It takes me about 12, what did I figure? It's like like 5 or 6 minutes per model to get them together. Boop, boop. Even these, I hadn't done these. These are really, like, if you look here, these actually aren't connected to the arms in any way. I actually went and got the arms in and then put the little cuff thing over and all that and put them together. It was pretty cool. I like these guys. They're awesome, but I don't think they're going to be particularly awesome on the tabletop unless I can get enough for the formation, which I currently am short of a few. But, you know, sometimes you just got to put a unit on and it'll surprise you. It's like the Inquisition. Inquisition can be crazy. That's why we have more monkeys. More monkeys. You need more monkeys. Plus, it's law. Yep, it's an old law. You may not know about it, but basically it states that if you can put a monkey in your army, you know, then you're legally required to do so. So I always follow that law. No need to, you know, be in trouble with the authorities or anything. I'm doing the wrong side. Need to do this side. 'Cause these are all the sides that touch, right? I know, I'm a mess. Super glue everywhere. I tend to trim it later and things like that. Oh, I'm going to glue myself to the... And once again. Nice, got it. One down. Many to go. 4. No. Glue the front side. But once I get this done, I'm going to have to work on getting... I want to do the Death Watch transport, which is basically a Rhino Razorback. But I kind of want to do the LED light kit with that one. So I'm not really ready to delve into that yet. So probably that will be lower on my assembly get ready list. Right now I think I'm going to put these guys away. The Legion of the Damned and all that stuff. I'm going to put them in their boxes for a hot minute, right? And then I'm going to probably go through and assemble. Let me look. Some of that stuff up there, because there's a flyer, the guard flyer. I really want to get that one done. My plan was earlier to assemble all the stuff that needs assembled. Get everything assembled, have my backlog of assembly done. For now. We all know that doesn't last forever, right? I think the Electro Priests are kind of there to give standalone Cult Mechanicus some bodies to put on the field, but I could be wrong. My only friend that plays AdMech only uses Rangers and Onagers. Yeah, I think they're kind of like to do that for the Cult Mechanicus. If you're kind of not playing both sides, you're doing like one or the other. They can do some stuff. It's like, but it's doing the wrong side again. It's like they're not the best, but if you can get them in their formations and you can get the bonuses, like if these guys, I think it's these guys, if they kill someone in close combat, their invul becomes a 3-up instead of a 5-up. But you have to earn that first, right? But you can earn that because you can play some trickeries with the cards. And that's the secret of AdMech. And when I start doing the AdMech videos, I'll discuss that more in depth. And I'm going to do the AdMech videos. I just wanted to knock out the Inquisition ones first because I wanted more time to think about the AdMech army and to coalesce my thoughts about each unit and its purpose and how I feel about its worth within the army as a whole. Yeah. Oh no! Oh no! Ah! Glue everywhere all the time. So I had to glue LT back together yesterday. He has stepped on a toy truck and got a cut in his foot. And they were all like, oh no, it's horrible. Let me take a drink here. Mom was like, pair the melee ones with the Vanguard to debuff the enemy. Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of combos and stuff with AdMech and all those guys. Putting them all together And there's just the thing that makes AdMech powerful, beyond if you use a war convocation or not, the thing that really truly makes them powerful is your ability to use, I'll say the cards because I use cards for it, but they're canticles and they're other little things like that to kind of customize them to your opponent and adapt them to the opponent that you're facing at the time. Realistically, you can only do that for about, and it's a diminishing strength as you do it, but do it for about 3 turns is what you can do. Yeah, these pods are for my Deathwatch, Bram. Yeah, they're for my Deathwatch. I assembled one the other day, and I've actually cut the foam out of the box that I keep the Deathwatch vehicles and stuff in for the pods already. So yeah, these are gonna be for the Deathwatch. We're gonna surprise some local opponents with this stuff for sure. But yeah, back on AdMech, all you can really do is about 3 turns of good swapping to meet your opponent. Like the last tournament I was in, I'll just use the battle I did against the opponent who brought the Space Wolves. What I did is I knew he wanted to get into close combat with me, so I basically used all the buffs from both the Skitarii and the Cult Mechanicus to make myself a extremely powerful close combat army. You know, raising my strength and my weapon skill and stuff like that. And then taking and using the Electromancer ability and using that to basically fry him, because my guys against Space Marines, you know, my just base guys aren't going to do a whole lot. But if I can jack up their strengths and stuff, then I can get some good hits in. But of course my initiative is lower, so what do? I try to knock some of his guys out before you can get mine, and that's what you use the Electromancer for. And you can reuse one of the canticles, or is it canticle? Can't remember which is canticle or whatever. But you can reuse that one of them once per game, and so that's the one I reused. And so you're talking 4 turns, because we were locked in combat for quite a while. My guys were holding up pretty good. 4 turns of hitting him with, in some of my units, 10 or more, just strength 4 hits, just basic hits, but those are a lot of hits, and it's basically, you know, like throwing 100 lasguns at a Terminator unit, right? Eventually you're going to knock some guys off, and that's what I did. I basically knocked most of his guys off through Electromancer hits, and I used his strength against him is what I did. He wanted to be in melee combat, he wanted to be fighting close to me, and he figured, I guess he didn't have the experience with AdMech. He figured, okay, it's AdMech, or maybe he'd seen some battle reports where other people use them differently. He probably figured, okay, well, AdMech, they're a shooting army. They don't want to be in close combat with me, but I did want to be in close combat, but only for 3 turns, because then after that, my ability to turn my AdMech force into it goes from like awesome to okay to mediocre as you use the various strengths cards. But my ability to turn myself into a close combat army fades after that into nothingness. So that was something there that I have to be careful of, right? Don't want to go more than 3 turns. And you can turn yourself into a shooting army as well. I did that with the Eldar that I faced before those wolves. I got the Warlord trait that allowed me to infiltrate a bunch of my stuff. I got as close as I could to his edge of the table. I scout moved everything I could up, and I pinned him basically on his edge of his table. And from there, I kept shooting, and he made a critical error, which actually helped me. I guess he was from out of town. He's different area than here. He'd come to the tournament, and in his meta, his big Eldar Seer Council and all this stuff would get shot up turn 1 by drop potting Space Marine type units, right? Those kind of stuff. Thanks, Captain Wee Booty. Wee Booty? Yeah. But they get shot up and stuff like that, right? And so he kept his stuff in reserve. A lot of his stuff in reserve. He only had a small amount of stuff. And what ended up happening is he had just enough stuff on the board during each turn, because he'd failed some reserve rolls and some he made, for me to shoot up. I kept shooting everything he had on the board off. But since he went second, he got dogs barking. The boy must have let him in. But since he went second, he kept getting, a couple of units in, so the game went in just because I shot him off the board completely, right? And it was, I felt bad. I really did feel bad, because he would he'd get 1 or 2 units on, and then do a little shooting at me, and I would make my saves. I was making 6-up invul saves on my rust stalkers and stuff like that. It was crazy. But most of my stuff would survive. He'd knock a few things off, and then turn around, and it was my turn, and I'd shoot everything he had on the table off, because I was turning myself into a shooting army each turn. And I saved my big, my +3 ballistic scope, because his Seal Council came in turn 4, so I was saving it for that. Sorry, another drink. And so I saved the best for last, and ended up winning pretty handily against a list that in the past I probably would have lost against, because I kind of put to good use. I want to make sure where I'm gluing here. And I probably assembled a few drop pods, but it's always like, they're always persnickety to me. But I put to good use, the philosophy of just use my opponent's strength against them, and his strength, that's too much glue. If I put that on there, that's going to cause issues. To waste a little bit, but I don't want to glue drop pod doors. Don't want to do that. Ended up my Land Raider, my very first Land Raider to put together. I had it all together. The front doors working and everything. And I was gluing the track on the back, on the very back, not near the front of the door at all. And I was gluing some track piece on. Last thing I had to do. And I was sitting down watching TV out in the living room in my chair, because that used to be my work area, right, on this little metal tray I got. And I was holding it up while that glued, and apparently I put too much glue and it leaked all the way down through the tracks to the front door joint and glued it shut. I was like, no. Oh, I've noticed this the other day. Oh, you can't do that. You gotta be careful. I always do that. Show you a second. This I always think super glue is one goes faster than it does. Let me hold it together though. Oh no! Get back it. Seriously. See, this is what you guys get to see. Me doing this stuff. I do this stuff all the time. But you only get to see it when I film it, right? Try to pretend that I'm like awesome at this stuff, but I'm not even close, right? This is what I noticed the other day. I did the other drop pod. I'm like, man, I can make me a giant dreadnought. Just use these as his claw hands. Like, dreadnought claw hand. But I have to buy, like $80 worth of drop pods to do it. So I'm planning to start a second army. Oh, the sharks, yeah. Yes. Trail at Cowbox. I picked up 2 of those, and although I did turn, I think about, I'm going to say 10. I think it was 10 of the 60 guys in there into Salt Marines for my Crimson Access. I think it was 10. I turned the rest into Death Watch. My Death Watch army is way bigger than it needs to be. Pod. I think you got to go with. It depends on how you like to play and what your meta is. Because one thing that you can do with pods, if you do a pod army, and I just like the fluff of a pod army, right? Just that's Space Marine, coming down, crashing down, assaulting into the enemy. I just love that idea of it, right? But one thing you got to look at with anything on there, no, stuff I need is over here somewhere. is that with a pod army, no, there's nothing on there. Is you can deny your opponent first turn shooting, and what you do is you just go second, right? And you null deploy. Don't put anything on the field. Everything's in your pods. You know you're going to get at least half your pods in, right? So half your army's going to come in at least, and then just null deploy, and then your opponent loses an entire turn of shooting and or psychic phase if he's got like attack psychic powers. And it kind of gives you a bit of an advantage, but you want to go second when you do that. Always want to go second, so that you get the advantage of being able to take away your opponent's shooting for that turn. And that's the way you win 40k games, is you make all of your points count every turn, all the time. If they're not doing something each turn, it's a waste of points, right? Like if you have assault terminators and a land raider, as long as they're inside the land raider, for as many turns as they're in there, they're just a waste of points. They're not doing anything for you. Okay, you got Tau. So Tau can try to shoot your drop pods down, okay, because I got Interceptor. But I wouldn't be too scared of that, because it's not like they're going to, drop pods aren't that weak and stuff. And the good thing about drop pods is Tau do not like to get up close and fight, right? So you want to go close in with the Tau and just beat them, right? Beat them in the face. And also think about sometimes maybe putting the missile launcher on a couple of those drop pods instead of the Stormbolter. It's a small points thing, but the thing is, most people don't expect anybody to do that because it's a short range. But it is a very strong weapon. I think it's strength. I want to say it's strength 8, AP 2. Let me find a book. Let me get it for you. Where is my Codex Space Marines? Let me look here for you. For that. You might already know, but let's look it up. Let's see what it is. Drop pods. Thunderstar Whirlwind. I don't need Thunderfire Cannon. I need a Thunderfire Cannon. So badly. What is it called? Deathwind Launcher. Yeah. 15 points. That seems like an investment in points, but let's see. Deathwind Launcher. It's going to be back here somewhere. It's going to be in range weapons. Is that where it's going to be? Let me see. It's not on this list, so let's look for C. Deathwind Launcher. There it is. There's only 12-inch range, right? Okay, it's strength 5, but strength 5, no AP, heavy 1, large blast. So, but it's strength 5, so you're wounding bikes and things like that, which a lot of people do, right? A lot of people bring those bikes all the time, and usually the problem with the bikes is their toughness is toughness 5, and so it's harder to wound them. But with the Deathwind Launcher, you can wound them. Now they can get away from you when they realize what you've got there, what you've done, the insanity that you brought that launcher. But it can be a nice surprise. I wouldn't put it on every drop pod, but put it on a drop pod. Just get one that's got the little launcher. Make sure it's farther away from your other drop pods, because it is short range. It is a blast weapon, and the likelihood of you hitting yourself with it, happens. But I'm going to tend to go for more drop pod lists myself, because I like the fluff of it. But if you want mobility, go with the rhinos. Go with rhinos, because you can move around. Stick 2 heavy weapons in there, and those are the 2 guys that you're going to have shoot out. So heavy bolters, las cannons, whatever you need, right? And those are the 2 guys that you're going to want to be shooting at everything and taking out the bad guys. And then if you get knocked out of your rhino, then you're on foot. But for a good while, you're able to move around. You can take the option of combat squatting, your tactical squads. And say you drive around at just max speed out first turn, and drop off, 5-man just bolter squads, half of the team. Often objectives to hold the objectives, and then the other half of the team who's got the 4 guys and the heavy weapons, or the 3 guys in heavy weapons, however it goes. Yeah, you can one special weapon, 1 heavy weapon, so that you get the special weapon, heavy weapon, keep them in the transport, right, and have them guys be the guys firing out over your transport. So that works really well too. Gives you mobility. It gives you the ability to just go out there, just flat out. And yeah, so if you don't want the mobility, drop pods all day. And the other thing is, if the drop pods are troop choices for your team there, then you get objective secured with the drop pods, right? Because they're troop choices, and so drop pods are considered troop choices. And if you can land them near objectives, then you force your opponent to take on the drop pods. I've seen so many games where the last thing left on the table is just drop pods, because the opponent ignores the drop pods because there's no reason to mess with the drop pods. But if you can get the drop pods onto objectives, then they become thorns in their side, and they have to deal with them. You know, and not that most people won't have something to deal with them, but it's a round of shooting, right? I've got to spend all my shooting on this one turn, taking out a drop pod. 1, 2, 3, 4. I gotta find the sergeant's one. They always put the sergeant stuff on a different sprue somewhere, and I gotta find it. And I never remember what sprues and how many drop pods have I assembled. This is, I don't know. This is gonna be 4 or 5. This is the 5th one. Not a lot, because I don't have a lot. But it's enough that I should remember where all the pieces are on the sprue, right? Yeah, it's the sergeant's one. But yeah, so if you're not worried about running around, then I would go drop pod. 5-man command squad with Meltas in a pod. Yeah, if they're going to be your thing, you want to take stuff out, but you got to realize there's an expense, and it just depends on your points that you got in your army, if that's points you want to get rid of. But making them just 5 men may not be a thing, but if you have enough points, maybe to put a few what we'll call ablative flesh wounds in there to protect the meltaguns a little bit, maybe make them last another turn so you can get some more shots at things. Oh man, don't worry about questions. I'm sitting here all by myself. Look at me. You can see me. I'm right here talking to myself in the room by myself, man. It makes us people feel like we're actually doing something. Yeah. I'd just be sitting here talking to myself if you weren't asking questions, right? Interaction is king. It's awesome. No problem. But yeah, to me, I always try to put at least a little something, because I don't like suicide squads. Personally, I just look. See, all my guys are named. All my guys are named. When they get finally finished and done, everyone has a name. And so I can stand to lose a few guys, and I will send soldiers off, to their doom if needed. If that's what's needed, right? I try to make sure that all my dudes are, if they have to be sacrificed, that there's a purpose to that sacrifice. That they have served the Emperor well, right? But yeah, oh no, look at me. Once again, thinking, oh look, I got it this time. That's exactly what I was thinking like 3 seconds ago. Look, I finally assembled one of these without it popping apart, but no. There we go, I did. That wasn't too bad, it just popped apart a little bit. I thought, I am so bad when I'm cleaning stuff. I think I clean it, and then I'm looking, oh yeah, I forgot to do that part. But yeah, a lot of people do that, drop in the Melta squads and stuff. You might want to think about plasma. I know a lot of people get scared of plasma because, I'm going to kill myself. It happens. You do kill yourself instead of your opponent, but plasma can be good for 2 reasons. One, especially if you're going to do a suicide squad, right? You're getting rapid fire shots if you're close enough, right? Because you pot it in. So you're getting a bunch of shots. and you're getting a little bit of range, because sometimes the pod can screw you, right? It's better than just plain deep striking. But sometimes there's nothing in the way to slow you down. You can end up a good ways away from where you wanted to be, and more than 12 inches, which is bad if you're using melter, right? So, me, personally, cost for cost, I would usually use plasma. Personally, is what I would use, because I like plasma. And I am unafraid of doing strange things and tactics. I mean, I've dropped let's just take these guys right here. Let's say these 5 guys, and this is the corner of the board, and they're in a building right here. And they're sitting at the top edge of the building, right there, and there's another little lane of the building here, right? I've actually taken Terminators and deep struck here, and this is the table edge right there. I've done that before because I wanted to make sure I got into combat with these guys the turn after, right? In a tournament, I did that twice. So going crazy, taking crazy risks, sometimes I can do that. Not always. You should not always do that. Keep these moving in case some super glue is touching where it shouldn't. There we go. But yeah, definitely, I don't see any problem with doing that, with melters and stuff. But I say for sure, I would do plasma. Me personally. Now, of course, I do Deathwitch, so I probably, and all 3 with Deathwitch, I would do frag cannons, which, unfortunately, not everybody can have the good toys, the frag cannons. But we have some other issues, us Deathwitch guys, that we have to deal with. So, all being what it is. Not sure how much further I'm going to go with this stuff. What am I doing? Okay, I am chopping off the right stuff. I just forgot to chop the harnesses. But once I get this drop pod done, then we will we'll have to decide. I'll have to decide what I want to do next. If I want to get into I'm really not sure I want to get into the LEDs and the Deathwitch Transport. Mostly because I'm not really sure if I want to do that with that one, or I want to use the Sky Shield landing pad. Really would like to spiff up the Sky Shield landing pad personally, actually. That would be fun. Make it look all cool and Sky Shieldy. I want to do the blinking. I got blinking LEDs. I want to do the blinking ones on it. Like a real landing pad does, little blinky lights. The special ammo on Sternguard is Poison 2 Up. Yeah, it's Poison 2 Up is what it is. So, and Poison doesn't work on the big guys. So that, yeah, you want to use something that can do that. Unfortunately, you can't use the Poison on the big dudes because they are not susceptible to that. Yep. And that's the other thing too. A lot of times it's okay, especially if you're going to do Sternguard, maybe not even give them special weapons, because a lot of times their special issue ammunition can do a lot of work. I think that's where a lot of people kind of misjudge the Deathwitch and kind of think I'm not sure if these are great. It's because the Deathwitch, if you just close your eyes and ignore all the other toys, I mean, you can do a lot of work with just special issue ammunition and their troop choices. So if you put them in a combined arms detachment, you've got troop choices with special issue ammunition that you can drop pod in and cause havoc and torture and much sadness for your opponent, which is kind of cool. No, in a cool way. Yeah, storm surges, giant robots. And another thing is the storm surge really doing a whole lot to your army? might want to throw in a distraction unit there, but a lot of times a good way to avoid win against your opponent is just to ignore those big things that are trying to lure you in with their attention-grabbing craziness, right? Just go for what the objectives are. Play the objectives, play the mission. A lot of times you can pull it out by playing the mission. I won a game once against Space Wolves, and the only thing I had left was one Terminator, Sergeant Rock. Sergeant Rock, one Terminator. He survived 2 full turns of Eldar firepower from basically my opponent's entire 1,500 point army because he had killed most of everything else I had left. But I won the game because Sergeant Rock survived, and I had more points because when I did have troops and units and stuff before he killed them all, I played the objectives, played the mission, right? And got more points than he did. So won the game on turn 5 with 1 unit left. Well, not 1 unit, one model left, Sergeant Rock. He was the last model on the table. And he's a tough old bird, Sergeant Rock there. But, sometimes we get cool stuff like that happens in games, and sometimes we have a unit of 5 Terminators that drop pod in, and a guardsman unit with 10 las guns shoots at you, and you roll 5 ones, and all your Terminators die, right? So, it happens, right? What you gonna do? What are you gonna do, right? I played a game, X-Wing, it was a tournament game too. The last game of the tournament. And it wasn't doing so bad in the tournament. Last game of the tournament. And went up against my opponent in that last game. And this is not an exaggeration, it's a guesstimate at how many rolls. It could have been a few more or a few less, but not many more or less. 75 rolls the entire game. And I don't know if you know too much about X-Wing, but on the dice you have a hit or a save, an evade, right? If you're doing evades, you either hit or evade. You have a focus, which you can turn into a hit or an evade, and then you have a blank, which is just a complete whiff. That entire game, all 75 rolls, all of my dice were all whiffs, all blanks, all of them, every single one. Yeah, it was horrible and frustrating and sad. Of course, I laughed about it in the end, because what can you do? You can't change that, right? You can't change the dice. You can't beat fate. It was fated to lose that game, right? Never had anything as horrible happen in 40K, though, that's for sure. I'm a little worried, though. A little worried now. I get this feeling like it's overhanging me that GW is trying to tie up all the loose ends of 7th edition now. Imperial Agents Codex feels like that badly because it's like it's thrown together. Just kind of bloop bloop thrown out. We got to get this out, move on next, kind of thing. And I feel like they're throwing that all together and they're getting ready for some 8th edition-y type stuff. And I don't know what their thing for 8th edition. I agree with a lot of people. There needs to be some fixing with things and rules and stuff. But I hope there's not too much dumbing down, like Age of Sigmar level dumbing down of the game. It's okay to have a game that's a little bit above some people, because I guess there's this idea and these thoughts these days that, you need to bring things down to people. But why don't we bring people up to things? Why don't we have something where people can lift up and strive up to something and better themselves? That's what we had to do. Okay, see you later, Bram, if you're still there. Have fun. Get some painting done and some assembling. Get that army going. Love to see some pictures of that. Put them on my Facebook thing. I don't think sharks are cool. I can't draw shark heads, or I might have done shark stuff. You know what? What I think all the time now, because I started out with Crimson Axes, and I wanted to make them eventually Imperial Fists, but I knew I didn't have enough to really do that, so I used Crimson Axes to start off with. It's painted in yellow. Yeah, bringing the Eldar down. I got Eldar players big in my local meta here. They're hoping it makes the Eldar, basically what they're hoping, is that it's completely fair, and that every Eldar weapon gets moved up to Strength D, and their troop choices become 1 point per model, right? With standard Strength D weapons. You know how the Eldar players are. They hope it makes it fair like that, just so the rest of us can, appreciate the awesomeness of the Eldar player and their awesome Strength D everything that they got going on. That's just the sadness. But hopefully that's cool. Hopefully they do some. I just hope they bring it to a level where it's uplifting to people and not trying to bring the game down somewhere, Because like Dungeons and Dragons, when I was a kid, that was the one game, right? I learned more math and bookkeeping and how to get along with people and so many other things that you're supposed to be taught in school. Nope, I learned that from Dungeons and Dragons. I learned that from a game. And I can see games like Warhammer and other stuff being that for youth, for young people, You want to know how to do math, you want to know how to measure and think of things tactically and logically and all those things. Well, this will do it for you, right? Building of lists and basically figuring out which unit is stronger and statistics and percentages, all that stuff. This is always the one where I swear. Let me find it. Let me see. Is there one that's got the? What is one? There's always this one that it'll fit in that one. It won't fit in the other one. There's one. Found that in the last drop pod I assembled. There's this one thing that only fit in one of these little seat panel things. Won't fit in the other one. It's weird. It's weird. Yeah, just learn how to do stuff from these games. I guess it's because it's in a manner that's fun and interesting, and it has that age-old argument everyone always has with their instructors, right? I'll never use this in real life. Well, you can use this in real life, right? At least the real life that you've put together on this fake table of warfare in the 40th millennium. But it's something that you can use, something that you can relate to, instead of the craziness of just numbers and symbols and the alphabet having an incestuous relationship with the it does not want to go in there. I'm going to have to trim that, I think, with the number system. It can be crazy. Okay, okay, I'm getting glued to everything here. This one seat does not want to cooperate with the program. I have to hold it like 15 different ways. Yeah, Eldar is way more Eldar really need a hit, man. They can be kicked over by the orcs and stuff. It's crazy. Crazy. Eldar need that. For sure, Mr. Captain. There you go. You guys have the CVs over there. That's right. CVs in England and Europe. A complete compilation of everything I've done in my life. I think if we had something like that over here, a little more detailed than a resume in the United States, I think some people would have some issues. There's some stuff on there that might not need to be on there, right? I know I would. I know I would have some problems. There's some stuff that probably doesn't need to be placed down on a piece of paper from my life. Summing my life, I could maybe sum up one incident in my life in 2 pages. Not my entire life. I got things I've done. Things that I have done. And like, gluing this on backwards and hoping that I can get it out before it sets. Yeah, wow, that was cool. I do that too often. That's what you get when you try to talk and assemble models. But it's okay. I can do it. No, not really. No one can really do it. This way. Okay. This is the worst part after this, though. The drop pod for me. Trying to get this whole seat assembly down into the bottom assembly here. And have it be straight. And then get the first wing. Because the first wing, that's the hardest thing. Getting that all set up. That's the drop pod. Drop pod is like trying to 3D print in midair. Sometimes some of it can feel just like that. Paint whenever. Well, I have to. That's why a lot of my videos you'll see, usually not during the day like this. My wife and the little one are taking a nap at LT's, watching something out there. He asked if he could watch something that he likes. which is basically saying in English, Dad, you watch too much History Channel and other stuff, I watch history. I don't have cable anymore, but history shows and stuff on YouTube about history and 40K and stuff. And although I'm interested in the 40K, I'm not interested in the history. I always play with the kids a lot of times. They'll like, we want to watch something. And I'm like, how about we watch, the history of history as that's told by historians who teach historical things. They don't like that at all. I don't know. I like things in the past. I guess it's part of me hoping that sometime in the future someone will want to know about the time and place and everything about where I live in. That there'll be some relevance and something left, right, when we get there. There we go. This is going to be the thing right here. Dude. Yeah. Well, nothing for it but to do it, right? Need to find my other glue. Oh no, I don't have any daughters. Here's my pain. You want to hear my pain? I have 6 boys. 2 of them have moved out already. But I have 6 boys. I have 6 boys because I've tried to have a daughter. I'm done. That's not going to happen. I've learned that. It's fine. But yeah, we have 6 boys. And the youngest one, that's Charlie. And yeah, he's always got he'll come out to me and he'll be like, he'll have something like a snack. Say some Reese's Pieces or something that his mom has got for her to have, right? And he'll come to me and he'll be like, can I have this? And I'm like, no, that's Mommy's. And he'll be like, oh no, Mommy said I could have it. She said that it was okay that I could have it, and yeah, I could have some. And I'm like, but Mommy's asleep. She's taking a nap. And he'll like, yeah, but she still said I could have some. So he's bad. He'll crawl. He'll get the chair, and he'll go into the kitchen. And he'll use the chair to get on the counter, and then he'll use stuff on the counter to get to the highest shelves. There is nowhere. If you leave him alone for 2 or 3 minutes, there is nowhere that he cannot get into and get something. So we are now thinking about figuring out a way to put a lock on something to keep him out of stuff. So yeah, he's a character. Charlie is. It's Charlie. That's who that is, Charlie. We call him Char Char, though. Which is kind of funny because we have a dog named Harley, a little mini Dachshund. And we call him Har Har. So sometimes we'll be calling the dogs the Har Har, Har Har, come on, time to go outside. And Charlie will be like, what? No, the dog. So, is it going there? What have I done? It's not having fun right now. There. Press this all together. Okay, is this right? Ah! I'm getting stuck to it now. Stuck to it. Yeah, he uses the... we have the refrigerator that's the refrigerator on top and the freezer on the bottom. The drawer freezer on the bottom. And he'll use the handle for the freezer and climb up. So it's super loose right now. I've got to go actually get that tightened here soon so he doesn't end up breaking it. But he'll climb on that handle and then boost his little self up. There we go. And I know some people might wonder, not watching this now, but later, about why I always fully assemble the drop pod, all the pieces. I do the inside and all that, and I fully assemble it, and then I go back and spend the horrible trouble of trying to paint all this stuff. I know it's just the way I am. I want to get it done so that I can use it a couple times as it's assembled before it's painted, because it's going to go into the paint queue and it's going to take a little bit to get it done. But then I can take the little teeny brush, through the door and in here paint the panels and the wires. So yeah. I also will use both weapon systems. I will take, let me see, where's it at? It's on one of these sprues. Let me find the weapon sprue. It's not it. Here it is. I got everything. Yeah, the weapon sprue. What I'll do is I will cut this off right here and then drill through it, and then take the drill, and it's not very much, but just widen slightly these holes right here that connect right on this peg. I'll drill through that, and then I'll put 2 of these magnets in there. I'll force them in there and glue them in there, because 2 of them is just as wide as that. They don't stick out at all, and they fill both sides. And then I'll put magnets in both sides of these and magnetize both weapons options for the drop pods. I can show you. I can tell you the drop pod. It's in the box. But the box is right here because I was putting it in it earlier. Out of the case. Here we go. Here we go. Whoops. Did it fall out? Yeah, it fell out. Fell out in the box. The door opened when I was pulling it. Here, let's set the case down. There you go. You can see, I don't know if you can put it right there. Probably can't see in there, but if I go, it's a little bit difficult to do it because there's not a lot of room in there, right? But, oops, didn't open the door. You just pop that down and slide it forward. And it's got the magnets in there. And I don't know if you can see the magnets in there. I think you can see the magnets in there, right? I can't see what you can see. Oh, there, the magnets in there. Now someone can see that. But just take it and slide it in there. And the missile launcher is actually harder than the Stormbolter. And then just press it up into place like that, and the magnets will grab it. And now you can use the missile launcher. Yay! So, and for right now, this will go in the case with the Army. But for right now, because it has to be painted, I'm just storing it up in there like that. Always that one door that's not 100%, right? What's a pop? There it goes. But yeah, that's how I do that for mine. Drop pods. Just to get them like that. And here's what stuff in the box. All ready to go. Drop pods in the wrong spot. There we go. Twist it a bit. Put the phone back in. Lock it up and set it under the desk for a minute. I am very, very, very dedicated to WYSIWYG. Not because I do tournaments a lot and a lot of them require it, but because to me, I just, to me, the look of things is very important. The whole magistry and pageantry of the models and everything on the field is an important thing. And also because I have a memory like an Etch-a-Sketch on a vibrating bed. So if I look at my model and it's got a storm bolter there, but I paid the 15 points for the launcher, I'm probably going to shoot a storm bolter at my opponent, forgetting that, oh, I have a launcher on that. So I like to be able to look at my units and go, okay, that is what is on that model. That's what I'm firing. So it helps me too a lot. Okay, we got this. We got moving, changing pages and instructions. Yeah, why don't you put that there? Okay, I'm not going to glue that there quite yet. I'm going to wait a hot minute and we'll do this part here, which is coming up on the part where I'm probably going to have to stop streaming and stuff, because then I will get to boring stuff like messing with the magnets and all that. Although I might magnetize that and then stop there, because then we really come to the part where we have to do stuff, and that's the sides, little side post things, those things, which that's just a whole bunch of holding things and getting more super glue on my fingers than I probably is healthy and all that. So I'm gonna get all these pieces on and throw the sprue in the thing behind me, the sprue holding box. Yeah, I mean, I started out not being very WYSIWYG, but it was like because I would assemble all the models and I was not extremely. I was letting myself be afraid of magnetizing and all that stuff and putting the models together differently, which is not like me in most of my life. I'm the kind of person like, oh, it's scary, let's do it. And not because I like doing scary stuff, it's because I don't see when something makes me go, hey, I'm afraid, as a stop sign. I see it as a caution sign. Take caution, move slower, but keep going, right? And a military background, so that makes sense. But I guess for me it was like, wow, this model costs X amount of dollars, and that's a whole lot of money for me, and I don't want to mess it up. But when I magnetized my first model, and I did it poorly, my Storm Raven, horrible magnetization job there, because I didn't have a pin vise or anything else, and crazy. But I was like, wow, I got to use all these extra parts, and now I can make my model look like it's supposed to look if I change up the things, and it's saving me money. That was the part, it's saving me money, because now I don't have to buy 2 Storm Ravens in case I want, a different weapons loadout on another one, right? So that really was the spurring point for me to start, hey, let's start magnetizing things and WYSIWYGing, and then from that I went into modifying things and making things different. And a lot of that came because I found the Inquisition Army. And then I went to GW and I'm like, cool, Inquisition Army, and I want to make all this stuff, and the models that you sell are A, super expensive for very few, and B, if I want a full unit of them, I'm going to have, 10 guys where half of them look exactly the same. Yeah. Claws. Yeah. You know what? I have been keeping myself from starting a Genestealer Cult army. I have the stuff from the Deathwatch Overkill. Those guys, and I'm keeping those guys no matter what, because I'll maybe want to eventually play the game that they came with, right? But when they came out with the Codex and stuff, I was like, these guys are cool, and they got crazy tricks and stuff, and they sound so interesting. But I'm already at the point now where I've got to work on the armies that I have and make them better and dedicate myself to them, right? So unfortunately, I kind of came to that point right before the Genestealer Cult came out. And 2, I've just not been able to dedicate it myself to the Xenos or anything else. You know, I've highly loyal Imperial player, whether it be Imperial Guard or Space Marines or the Inquisition or whatnot. I'm just a loyal Imperial player. I only regret, you know, I don't know. I'll just have to see. It's definitely on the if I expand list. If I decide this army is where I want it, like my Imperial Guard is just a few tanks and chimeras and some veteran squads and stuff like that, and that is where I want that army. I don't want that army any bigger. It's always going to be a add-in allied type force, or for smaller games playing new players or something like that, which is excellent, or to let new players use if they play me. So I'll do that. I do that. Come on, come down to the store. Someone shows interest, I said, come down to the store. I'll give you my guard players to play. You can play them. You don't even have to buy models, and you can see if it's a hobby, something that interests you. So that's what they are, allies. And for playing against new players or letting new players use to play against me. So that army probably will not grow beyond what it is. But if I ever get some of my other armies to that point, which some may be, like my Space Marines, I know there's some stuff that I would like to have for some of them. And AdMech is the same. There's a few more models that I need to get. But once I do that, unless they come out with something new, the AdMech will be complete. And stuff like that. So, pure Xenos player. Yep. This is Cult. I don't think Cult counts anywhere close to being part of the Imperium. I'll have to send an Inquisitor out there to check out their stuff, my friend. Don't worry. They're completely fair. They only kill everyone. That doesn't go there. That one goes there. So I gotta put this thing together, which is always fun. Where's my puppy crying? Hold on. I'm gonna make sure he puts a puppy out. She shouldn't be crying. Hey, where's the puppy crying? Let's see. Yeah, put her outside. Let her go play. She don't like to be cooped up during the day. Yeah, we got a new puppy. Her name is Cinnamon Toast Crunch. LT named her. And he let her in for some reason. He must went out to feed his chickens. We've still got the Nankins and they're his chickens now. He's taking them over to do his stuff. So she probably came in when he did that, and then he decided to put her up in her crate. Our doggies are crate trained. They sleep in their own little crates. And that really came about because the Dachshunds were first. And we still got Har left, the mini Dachshund. And they are serious tunnelers. They like to sleep. He gets under his blankets and he cozies them all up and everything. And you don't even know. Sometimes you look in the crate and you're not even sure if he's in there because he's so wrapped up under those blankets. But and so now the new puppies that come in, they have their own thing. She's not so much as a Cinnamon Toast Crunch. She's a girl. She's a puppy. She's a puppy. She's a little puppy. Alright, we got that going. Always have to check all the time with these. I'm glued to my super glue bottle. To check all the time with these type of models, or something's supposed to keep moving to make sure everything still moves. I'm still scarred by that whole Land Raider incident. It was so sad. It was all working. It was all great. The doors open. I was gonna paint up the inside and everything, and nope, that's sealed. Sealed up. I actually have another Land Raider now, but I bought it assembled from someone else, so another mischance. See, I'm the kind of person that actually will, when it comes, because like assemble everything and get going. But when it comes to like a vehicle where I can't get to the insides once it's closed, if I want to paint it, then I will stop and paint the insides, even though they're going to be sealed up. To me, it's just kind of like, it's what you got to do, right? So that goes in there, and then we will glue that there. So need just a little dab of glue in here. That'll do it. I'm gonna. I don't want to do that. I was gonna do this though. Make sure. There we go. All right, so I'm gonna get this touching good. There we go. Want something? There we go. Set that over there. I'm stuck to it. All the time I get stuck to stuff. Alright, haven't glued that down. How long have I been up? Oh, she's a puppy. She's a puppy. No, they grow up to be mean dogs. Like Harley, he is, I got him for my wife, actually. And he is, he doesn't like people. He loves other animals. Like, you bring other animals in the house and play with them and all that stuff. But other people that aren't part of the family, he does not like. He will kill you. He will release 100 pounds of Dotson from that 10-pound body, and he will take you out. He'll do it, too. He can do it. I believe him. He's crazy. But here's the strange thing. Okay, he's got our we got our family, my kids, my wife, and me. But we have my wife's grandmother and my wife's mom, and they rarely come over. Sometimes they come over, but not often. But Harley, you would think he was their dog. You would think he was their dog. They come over and he runs up to him. He's like, "Oh, I love you, I miss you. It's the greatest thing in the world that you're here." It's like, and you're like, "A betrayer." Just such betrayal. But the other thing is that he's like he won't bite me, and he won't bite Gigi, and he won't bite Grandma. He'll bite everybody else, including my wife. If she messes with something, and he gets upset about it. So yeah, what are you gonna do? But the dogs listen to me anyway. It's part of the same reason why some human beings don't like me. I'm pretty set in what I will or will not tolerate, and the dogs know that. They know if they get past a certain point of something, then I'll just give them a smack up their little doggy heads and be like, "Yeah, we're done. That's enough. Stop." So even the new puppy, she's still puppy bitey. But she knows you come up puppy biting me, and then she'll just get stuck in her crate, put outside, so she won't puppy bite me. She'll be like, "Hey, what's up?" So, get all this off here. I am going to do these. I'm going to show you. I'm only mostly because it'd probably be funny for you guys to watch me do this stupidity here. These stupid things that I do. Get myself glued and then have to smash in weapons because these are not exactly tight, and having to make sure that the magnets aren't cocked in there and all that. Sideways and messed up. Cockeyed. Alright. So, and this takes, I think where I learned the just go for it, not fear, is when the one video I did with the dynamic Contemptor Dreadnought. Man, I had to take that model. Got some ice. I'm going to take that $50, $60 model, and I just hacked it up. And I was pretty much not sure if that was going to work or not. Not sure. Here's what takes a little bit of faith, though, right here. This will no longer work the way they designed it. And that landed up on the shelf somewhere. So now, this is it right here. This is what you got to do. The model is now currently broken. You got to be willing to break it to do what you want to do with it, right? Oh, there we go. There we go. And this is the right drill bit. Drill bit. Gotta drill the right spot. My hands are working today, which is great. They haven't been working lately, the last 2 weeks very much. I haven't been able to hold my left hand steady, which is unfortunate. If we're trying to paint stuff. The last couple days they've been doing okay. So, and I get my appointment for the VA in a couple months coming up unless they cancel it. I'm hoping that doesn't happen again this time, because seeing your doctor once a year is really, really not helpful. And because they need to look and figure out. This feels like it's getting worse in there, so they need to look at that again and see if there's some things we need to be doing. There we go. And then we take this, and you don't really have to do it much on these. It's just like kind of like just barely kind of making that bigger on all these little pieces. And just barely a little bit comes out of there. These ones a little bit more than the other ones. And there we go. Just a little bit comes out. See? Not much. Turn that the other way. Don't want that drill bit coming down off the shelf. Drill bit first. Probably end up breaking the drill bit or whatever it landed on. So then we need the magnets. And we take 2 of them. Sounds on. Tell you what, if you get magnets like, oh, that one goes these or these. Don't stick like one, like right here. I just picked it up, like one right here, and then see how close you can get it. Because what'll happen, it'll go, and it'll end up cracking them both. That happened to me last time I tried. I cracked both. I tried 2 magnets, just smashed them. It was fun. I did it like 2 or 3 times before it cracked, but once it cracked, then it became less fun because I'm like, no, I have to get more magnets, and then my wife's gonna ask me what happened to the magnets that I had, and that will be a problem. Okay, so you got to get this in there straight. That's the problem. You got to get it straight because the hole is just big enough. Let's see if we can get one in to start. Because then I'll end up gluing the magnets together, and then that would be a problem. Okay. Let's push it in. Yep, that went over there. There we go. So push it in. So, like I said, it's just big enough. And it's got to be flush, or as flush as you can get it without breaking it. See, I told you this was interesting for you guys. Yeah, I'm using this. Probably should be using this. Safer, right? Get in there. No, I got it sideways. Alright, I'm going to take this out and do it some more. Seems that I have misdrilled somehow. Not get it all out. Yeah, it feels like that. Turn the drill a little ways each direction. Because it is just tight. Just tight. Of course it works perfectly when I'm doing it like on my own. But then when I say, hey, let's do it. Show you guys how to do it. You know, my wife buys wine directly from China. But she buys a lot of other stuff from China for the stuff that she does. And so, whenever she buys her stuff, she'll be like, she'll come ask me, she's like, do you need any more magnets? Because I'm buying this stuff from China. And I'll be like, yeah. I need these ones, and these ones, and these ones, these sizes. And she'll go to the person that she buys the stuff from. There, that fits good. And she will get this right that way. And so I want it to go in this direction. But we want to put glue in there first before we do that. Put it down. But yeah, she'll do that and buy them. But there's a lot of places if you just Google and look online. Amazon, you know, it's just the price of the magnets, you know. But you can definitely get them cheaper than you can from some of the stores. And a lot, I'll tell you, let me get them, I'll show you in a second once I get this pressed in. There, that's how it's supposed to look. All pressed in, and push away, grab, push away. So in the right priority, pushed in. Right as you can get it. 2 of them will fit in there, at least thin ones. But these big ones that like I use for the nights and stuff, I get them from Home Depot. They actually have a pretty good selection of magnets. What you get is actually, well, you get the 3, and then this other little tiny magnet comes in it. And I think they do that because of that breakage issue. Because if you get more like this, if I were to let these all become one thing without this weaker magnet in between, it would be super hard to pull this apart. And plus, it would be like trying to pull everything around it. It's super strong block of things. I use these. Actually, use these to find studs in the wall, because they screw the drywall to the studs, right? And so you just find the screws, and then that's how you find the screw. So that's what I use those. Besides modeling, I use them for that. So we got that side done. Now we gotta do this. Gotta remember how this goes. Okay, this goes like that. So this wants to go on that side, so we want this magnet on this side. Okay, so pull it off and set it down. Okay. Usually you can do this. Boop. You can do it like that. Make sure you get it right. And tell the skull. That's how you know it's the right side up. And put the little dab of glue in here. Glue. Some people put green stuff in there as well. I don't do that per se. Not big green stuff use right yet. And then you can just slide it in like that, so that you know it's in the proper polarity. And you have to squish it in a bit, make sure it's flat, so it's sticking up, and then you're going to get more of a friction fit than a magnet fit. It's still kind of a friction fit though, I'll tell you the truth. When you do it this way, it's still a really tight fit when it's all put together, trying to get it up in there. But even if it's friction fit, you know, get banged around or something, you could lose it. But with the magnets, that's not coming off. That's staying there during play and all that. And because you have, basically what you're going to have when you end up with this is 4 in a row. The more magnets you have, see like this little one right here, that's not very much strength, but as you can see, it's already stood up. Now if I take this many magnets, see, got to get much closer to it to get it to stand up like that. So the more you have in a row, the stronger that pull is. So that's part of the reason why I do 2 in the middle and the other sides. One is to get it flat, so it's nice and flat the other. But even if I just had 1 in there and there's a gap, it would still hold. But with them 4 like this together, it makes it a strong connection to it. Wrong side. This one. And we'll drop it on there. Boop. So we'll do the other side. Yeah, but it makes a good strong connection. 4 magnets together. They just really want to hang out together and stay that way for a while. And just press it in, slide it over, and then use that to straighten it up. And there you go. It's it'll be magnetized when you're ready. You do the same thing with a storm bolter. That's what I do. Always need this piece though. Take a magnet and bloop. So you get this one, which will fit like this on here, and you gotta, this like is the long way is where the weapon goes, because the weapon tilts. Weapon tilts on that, pivots on that. So it's another thing you gotta make sure you get right, so you can get the weapons put together properly when you do it. Yep. the glue in there. Get the right magnet on the right side is the thing, because if you reverse the polarity on them and they're trying to push each other away, that's bad. And like, especially like, see this storm bolter here? It's impossible once you get it pushed in like that to get that out without causing, you know, severe trauma and damage to your piece and basically breaking your model and having to find a way to unbreak it to put it back together the right way. But magnetizing can be fun and save you some money for sure. Okay, there we go. And yeah, I should put a cap on here, shouldn't I? Safety Sallies might get on me. Might tick me out. You know, I went to England a few times. The last time was when I was in the Navy. Went to Portsmouth and learned a hard lesson about the alcoholic content of hard cider. Those things go down smooth, I'll tell you what. Go down easy, go down smooth. But then when you try to get up from the bar, you might be a little more tipsy than you thought you were, for sure. Never got to go see Stonehenge, though. I tell you what, I wanted to go see Stonehenge. They, but the day that they did that, they had, because we were there for a bit. The day they were having tours out to go do that, I had duty on the ship, so I couldn't get off and go see it with my buddies. So there we go. We can glue that together, and then that'll stay, and then this will shove in there and be magnetized. So, but I have to let that dry a little bit before I do some other stuff. So that's about it. I'm gonna say goodbye to you guys now. I'll finish my drop pod later and some other stuff. But I just wanted to talk and hang out a little bit with everybody, see how the things were going. And of course then I have to come back and take all this glue off here too. It always seeps out. But thank you very much for watching. It's fun to spend some time with you guys. I will probably at one point... Oh, you've never been... I'm going... Irish. Well, you have... It's a lot easier for you to get to England than me. You should go... If you haven't seen Stonehenge, go see it. Take some pictures. Show me some pictures. I'd like to see it. But yeah, I'll see you guys in a bit. And I appreciate you watching. Appreciate you talking, interacting. It's always fun to hang out with fellow hobbyists. I know it's always cool for us to know that there's someone who's interested in the same things we're interested in, and that we're not, crazy. All that stuff. Alrighty, guys. I will talk to you later as soon as I figure out how to push the stop button on this. Hey, thank you much. See you in a bit.